just getting jazz funky with that music. I love that choice of music, by the way.
Me too. I adore it.
It's fantastic. Guys, welcome to Yelling at Clouds, part of the USUK Podcast Network. This is episode 6, part 2. You may remember this was the first one, Attack of the 1970s in Space, part 1. And this is part 2. There we go. Now,
part 2.
There's part 2. There's something you may sort of associate with the 70s. Cheap weed, terrible haircuts, and massive, huge beginnings of sci-fi franchises. And, you know, Star Trek already had its own franchise, but this was its first foray into the movies, right, Eric?
Yes, indeed. But the funny thing about our title, part 2 of which, is that it's not just that a whole bunch of these franchises got started in the 70s. It's that this particular period of the 70s actually yielded a strange sort of... there's a sort of sensibility about it that isn't present earlier or later. And this film is emblematic of that. Cosmic imagery and ideas, in other words. And that's what in a way, I associate that with the 70s. Cosmic ideas, cosmic images, usually painted on the side of your van. But also in beautiful films like this. And it is beautiful. We've already discussed how it's sort of a musical insensibility. And yeah, I won't belabor that in part 2. But it's also very much an art house. 2001: A Space Odyssey only carried on to its more hippie-ish sensibilities. In fact, a number of hangers-on from 2001 were in this film in a certain way. 2 people I want to mention. By which I mean the artist Bob Mccall and the effects man Doug Trumbull. No need to go into images yet. Suffice it to say, these are the 2 artists, mostly Mccall, that I will be focusing on this episode. Last week, we focused on Sid Mead and his contribution to Star Trek the Motion Picture. Hi, Sid. And, of course, my own personal experience of speaking to him in the context of 9/11 and honoring the 20th anniversary thereof. This time, we'll be talking about another artist they brought in to contribute and who made a massive contribution to a certain sequence in the film, the Spock spacewalk sequence. And his name is Robert Mccall. Now we'll put up an image of him. Hello.
Hi.
Even behind him, you'll see a sample of some of his work that was done outside of Star Trek. There's another sample of his work that I randomly put in there somewhere, and that gives viewers a sensibility of what his ideas were like, visually speaking, outside of the film. And you'll see also another image of a book I have of his artwork.
Finding it now.
Take your time. It's partly my fault, ladies and gentlemen, for feeding the images not necessarily in the order.
No, it's my... See, the listeners, if you don't follow me... Okay, I'm going to have to reload it. Before I reloaded it, but while I reload the picture of this book, which I have, look, it's here. I do crazy stuff at crazy times. And last night I was doing the radio late night, and Eric was like, "Yeah, let's plan for the show because we hadn't done that yet." And he was sending me pictures. Couldn't get to him straight away because I was mid radio. But here we go. Here's the book. It's my fault.
It's actually partly my fault for not getting it done sooner than the day immediately before. So, sorry, I'll take the cross too. Here's Robert Mccall's art book that I have. And as I said elsewhere, out of order, I did also send an image of his work that was not Star Trek. But we could throw that in as we go.
Is it no?
Actually, that one is a very important one. That's what I'm glad you started with that, even though I wasn't expecting it. This is probably the work we would most know him for outside of Star Trek. And that is, he did several paintings for 2001: A Space Odyssey, 1968. And this was used as the advertising poster for same. He did several others.
Oh, shit. Is that what
now, this is one of the pieces he did for
Low
Star
res.
Trek The Motion Picture. Low res, my fault.
That's right.
But even with the sort of squinty-eyed approach that the low-res effect gives it, look at how weird and cosmic and not necessarily attached to physics in terms of its display we're looking at here. Planets everywhere, way more planets than you'd expect, lightning between planets and dimensions and lava lines and blah, 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 blah. Look at all of that
nightmare,
crazy.
Isn't it?
It's gorgeous.
I love it.
Now, this is a bit higher res. Now, this is one of the pieces, and there was an attempt to replicate this accurately in the film. Let's look at this one for a minute. Look at all that. Doesn't it look beautiful? And now, let's see if we can find the depiction of it in the film itself.
Which is... By the way, guys, we haven't got this in any kind of order.
We sort of do, but not strictly do. That's okay. It'll allow your eyes to kind of glaze on the image for a bit because it's a pretty image.
Is that it? No?
Nope, but we will talk about that image.
Guys, you have to bear with us. I mean, okay. Let me
remember, it's jazz, man.
Jazz.
Every episode a painting, but a Jackson Pollock painting.
Where is it? I'm trying to find it. I'm sorry about this, Eric. Okay, so we have Space Odyssey.
Next on Podcast Rescue.
Yeah. The thing is, right, I realized I'd missed a load of these pictures and I had to go back and read. Is that what? Just,
yeah.
There you go.
There it is.
Sorry, guys.
Low res again, but if you compare it to the actual painted image, it's fairly close. Right? Better one, better two. Better one, better two. Nice,
I like the
right?
the carving or the detailing on the egg.
It's asking a lot of these effects model makers people to do that, but they did it, and it is surreal. It is not necessarily real, and I love that sensibility, the attack of the 1970s weird cosmic sensibilities. In space.
In space.
And don't you get that sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's look at a couple other concept to screen comparisons.
Yes, I have.
I'll let you pick which one. There's that one. Now, when Spock, just for context, in the film, Spock says, I need to find out more about why this giant spaceship is heading towards Earth, meaning to zap it into oblivion. So he gets on a spacesuit and he goes off into the giant spacecraft V'ger, attempting to make contact with it, and sees all of this cosmic imagery while he's doing so. It was a late ad sequence meant to replace something else that wasn't working. And there's the screen comparison. Look at how pretty well it mirrors it. A giant plaster cast of this actress, Persis Khambatta, was made, and the effects were made to suit. So brilliant. I should probably point out that the second hand in doing these effects is Douglas Trumbull. You don't have to switch to his picture yet. We definitely will have room for it, but if you can do so. Trumbull was one of several people contributing to the effects on this film, considering that it was locked to a certain date and they needed to get these effects done quickly. There's Douglas Trumbull looming over his model of the Tyrrell Corporation building in another film he did, a little picture called Blade Runner. And Trumbull is known for a great deal of effects in other films. It includes Close Encounters, includes Star Trek The Motion Picture, includes a film he directed, Brainstorm, which is a lovely love story with cosmic elements in it. And he was very much a cosmic fellow himself, being a member of the class of 2001. In other words, he worked on that film with Stanley Kubrick, and he clearly has carried forth the hard science itself, being a subject of cosmic, awe-inspiring wonder, and ran with it. And that's part of the mentality of the 1970s space that I'm talking about.
Space.
Also apparent in Close Encounters, also a product of the 70s. So what else? There's a couple more Bob Mccall pieces that, like that one. Let's take this particular one and have a little sidebar subject about it. Because yes, it's funny. This spacecraft, and I assume it is a spacecraft of some kind. God only knows the civilization that built it. And yes, it's meant to be somewhat surrealistic, so we're not to ask too many questions like these. But he painted this. Go for it.
For the listeners at home, we'll put the images on Facebook. So we're looking at it looks like a metallic eye with a bright orange center, and in the middle of that you've got an iris which almost looks like Sputnik. But if you turn your head to the side, though, it kind of looks like a vagina.
Yes, let's simply approach that dead on, shall we? Let's start by comparing that painted image to the actual effects image realized in film. Again, very cosmic, and it evokes several of those paintings of Bob Mccall's that we have looked at before this moment. But yes, if you turn to your side.
Yeah.
Yes.
There it is.
And I'm just going to tear into that subject briefly. But I'm going to take this as a compliment. The Red Letter Media people, the Plinkett people on YouTube, Mike Stacklasa loves Star Trek, and he loves this film in particular for the reasons I say, intellectual and other, but also for this reason. He has noted with a certain amount of humor, tongue-in-cheekness, but also intellectual rigor, the notion that Star Trek the Motion Picture is not a film with a lot of sex in it, but it is sexually sophisticated on a thematic level. And I would recommend that you go look up Red Letter Media's reviews on this to get a more specific take on it. Suffice it to say, Spock, in attempting to learn what's up with V'ger, essentially undertakes a vision quest where he flies first into a pulsing orifice and then flies through these pink lips until he reaches a glowing pink button-shaped object which has special significance, and then he touches it, and revelation happens. It's all there, folks. Don't look at me.
I'm almost glad you didn't supply a picture of the orifice he went through, because I think we might have got pulled from YouTube.
No, not necessarily, except there are so many. Except you'll find that YouTube apparently has no problem with Mike Stacklasa and others talking about that theme in that way. And yes, I believe it has some merit. I don't endorse it in the way that I endorse this film as a musical. But yes, the imagery and the subplot of Decker and Ilea indeed is there to be read as a film dealing with thematically sexy. No, it's dealing with sexy themes, but it is dealing with it in a way that is sophisticated, in a way that, as I mentioned at the time, Black Hole should have been dealing with its religious imagery in the same manner of sophistication, and didn't.
I mean, if you were watching that scene with Spock floating in front of the orifice without your glasses on, I'm just saying, like, you know, you could probably get it wrong. Darling, pass me my glass. What is he floating in front of? You know, is that
the thing that defies belief is that they were being this sophisticated with sexual themes and imagery, and at the same time, this film was rated G.
Yeah.
And it played as such. When I was watching the film on television in the early 80s, the special longer version, as it's now known today, none of this was cut from it or deemed unsuitable for children. And indeed, if any kid from that era asked what the hell those lips were, I'm sure the parents probably just said, oh, it's the CBS logo. Now shut up.
It's from the couch from the 60s. That's what it is.
Indeed. Now, okay, so we've handled Bob Mccall as a major weapon in this film. Don't you think? What do you think he brings to it to you?
I think he brings that surrealism. I mean, to take this to an Alex level, listeners. I don't know if we're getting used to that now. Yeah, but like one of my favorite videos. I mean, I'd have to probably show you before. I mean, it is one of my favorite music videos is the music video for Bliss by Muse. They released an album called Origin of Symmetry a few years ago, 2001, I believe. And this video features the lead singer falling through the middle of this giant spaceship, and he's just falling for what seems like forever. And that to me scares me. Like when you think of space and aliens and things like that, it's the mass of these things that scares me, you know, and they're being floatless in space and lost and far, far, far away from home. And what this art does is it does transport you to a completely different world. I mean, we can laugh and joke about this picture I'm pulling up again. Oh, it looks like an eye, it looks like a vagina. But look at it. It's a completely alien world. And when you're dealing with Star Trek and you're dealing with I mean, look at that. It almost looks like a sacrificial, ceremony, you know, and this here, you know.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that one up. I love that one.
Yeah. So I think that's what he brings. He brings something that you can look at and go, that's not of this world. Yeah.
Phenomenal cosmic images. Itty bitty running time.
Yeah. I'm just astounded at how, you know, for a movie that's 2 hours long, I think it's 2 hours, 10 minutes or something like that. You know, the amount of work that would have gone into, you know, these models, this artwork, and you know, everything that goes with this movie, the acting, the way that they had to get things right, you know, it really makes you appreciate the movie more, doesn't it? Because they don't get much time to sort of make, you know what I mean? Like they put this months and years, whatever it is, of work into a 2 hour flick, and you know, whatever they've made, you might only see for half a second on a screen. It's nuts.
That's the nature of effects. In fact, your statement gives me two things I can use to bounce off of that. First of all, you mentioned the model makers. People did have to build a model of the space lips. They really did. And in fact, I think I sent you a picture of that model of the space lips. It's there to be found. The model existed and endured indeed for a long time after the filming of this film, and they tried to auction it off. I don't know if there was any bids, because I'm sure it was expensive, being a movie film screen prop.
Is that this white one here?
See?
That's a couch.
Well, that's all. You see, that's the shooting model of the Space Lip ship, and the fibers you're seeing in the center is merely attached to all the fiber optic lighting they use to make those little bitty lights around the lips. And if you were to go back to one of the images from the film, you'll see all those lights on the edges. There you go. Perfect choice. Yeah. All those lights are there. And they go right back to the original painting where the lights were there too. That's a pretty, even though less obvious, that is a pretty faithful rendering of a concept that is not realistic, that is surrealistic. And it goes back to what Clive Barker said about the fantastique. And just to give it a little bit of theater of the mind here, I'll get up and get the actual book where the quote is, and you'll hear me slightly be fainter as I walk away. Yeah, and then I'll sound louder as I come back.
Just like the part one when he was typing on the keyboard. He actually had this ready for you. He's just doing it for effect, guys.
Theater of the mind, man.
Theater, baby.
But here's the quote, and it bears repeating with regard to Bob Mccall and his work, and the effects people and their work in interpreting Mccall. Clive Barker said this about his brand of art, the fantastique. The problem that fantastique painting has vis-a-vis modernism is that modernism is essentially about ways to see. Cubism is about the way the eye interprets. The isms, by and large, have been about the artist's way of seeing in terms of interpreting reality. John Cage and his take on music from a couple episodes ago, for instance. Dali's take on that one painting from a few episodes, for instance. What the fantastic artist does often, and he cites Giger as a prime example, but I maintain that this sequence is a prime example also, is saying I'm not terribly interested in seeing apples. I'm not interested in interpreting the way to see an apple. I'm interested in the fruit you haven't even seen before, and I'm going to represent it as realistically as possible.
Nice.
So with regard to this film, yes, this film realistically depicts Earth ships and vessels operating according to physics in designs that adhere, believe it or not, largely to established physics. Star Trek was relatively rigorous in that in this period.
Well, Voyager itself.
But then we have this sequence, and it is rendered every bit as realistically as the aforementioned normal universe stuff, and it is every bit as believable to your eye as the realistic stuff. And it is not real. It's cosmic spacey stuff, but it isn't grounded. And yet it is made to feel grounded to your eye and to your mind and instincts by virtue of how real it was painted, first of all, and then rendered in physical form by the effects people. How's that for a rant?
Space! I love that. I love it. But
Space!
This is what I used to love about Star Trek, though, is because I can imagine that being like, even though they meet Klingons and Vulcans and they see these things, giant vaginas in space, you know, all of these things, like the way they operate the ships, and you know, it's almost very Navy-esque. It seems realistic at the same time, if that makes sense. It seems like that's kind of like how we would do stuff. Yeah, we would call it a galactic federation, and we would say we'd be helping all these planets and bringing everyone together, when really we're just sticking our nose where it's not wanted. That's definitely how we would do it, you know.
Yes, and that's just crediting world building of a number of people, Roddenberry included. There's a great deal of world building in the novel, and Roddenberry wrote it. I may cynically at the back of my head go, but no, he wrote it, and there's a significant amount of world building that we don't necessarily have the time to get into here. Who knows? There might be a part 3 recorded at some later date. But there's a lot of that. Oh, also regarding the surrealistic image, symmetry, and the effects guys' ability to render it that you wanted credited, they do need to be credited. I mentioned Trumbull, but there are a lot more people involved in this film, both the original incarnation of it in 1979 and the director's edition made in the 2000s, and it's currently being reformatted for 4K for release next year.
Wow.
And all of the people, some of whom I have had the good fortune of very briefly interacting with, need to be credited. And if I am not capable of crediting it, here's what I can do. I can recommend one of the books in the picture of books of Star Trek the Motion Picture stuff that I have here. If you could kindly bring that up.
I was doing it on Facebook. I was trying to that's not how it works, Whiteley. Here we go. There you go. Let's click on Messenger.
At the top of that, you'll see the book, Star Trek the Motion Picture Inside the Art and Visual Effects, co-written by Jeff Bond and Gene Kozicki. And I have had the good blessing of being a Facebook friend of Jeff Bond's. And I don't take advantage of these relationships a whole lot, except to say hi, love your work, and otherwise to leave them be. The one thing not to do being to go, oh my God, I love your work so much, I want to stalk you at night.
Yeah,
don't do that.
Nobody likes that. Nobody likes that.
But I should credit Jeff Bond and Adam Mojo Leibovitz, who has worked on numerous Star Trek projects, including the director's edition of Star Trek the Motion Picture, for being so kind enough to interact with me, to say hi, and to pat me on the back and encourage me in this a little bit, which is all they needed to do. In terms of the Voyager poster I mentioned in the last episode. And again, that was done just for fun And maybe if the powers that be are willing, they'll let me sell a poster of that looks better than that. But the two people I mentioned did say, hi, thank you for saying you love our work, and hey, nice picture. And that's,
get off my yard.
And believe it or not, that's a tremendous boon.
Nice.
So I want to plug that book, which is why I mentioned it. And I want to say that if you go there, that's a far better way of getting a good summary of all the many creative people that contributed to this film and who deserve credit.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah, art. It's all art.
Now,
it all starts about.
throw something random at me, Alex.
Yeah, okay. I'll throw something random at you. Okay, so we've just been looking at this, which is beautiful. But can you explain this, please?
Yeah, that's the one time I'm going to really get into a serious rant on this episode, or indeed for a large part on this series. I don't often really yell at clouds on yelling at clouds, but here I'm gonna. But say what you need to say first. And
I know, I was going to say for the listeners at home, we've got like an almost pencil type ink drawing of the Vija ship, and it's zoomed in on the main sort of chassis of the ship. But it's lots of
indeed the ship itself is there, and you can see all the line work that you sort of do see in the colored version as well. I just did this, copied it, and colored it. Coloring book style because it's a sketch, but I don't have this up to show off. I'm not that arrogant. I'm putting that up to make a point. And this is, again, just me having a rant for the fun of it. It's not a serious attack. But a lot of fans either are or want to be under the impression that V'ger is in some way or other connected to the Borg, a race of cybernetic villains introduced on Star Trek The Next Generation more than a decade later than Star Trek The Motion Picture.
Mm-hmm.
Why do people want to make this connection? Because, after all, the Voyager 6 space probe was launched from Earth, then zapped via a black hole, what they used to call one, quote unquote, to a far side of the galaxy and to a planet populated by living machines, sentient, self-aware to a point machines. But then I'm going to point you to a very quick series of pictures that explain why people may have gotten this misimpression. Because machine planet doesn't necessarily mean Borg on its own, and living machines don't mean cybernetic creatures. But let's talk about a book that I also own, the Star Trek Chronology, which I think is the way most fans were fed the line that I'm about to show you from the book and got people thinking about Borg. No, not that one, but we'll use that for me to beat my chest in a moment. There's show the cover of the book.
So this one here?
Wrong. Nope. It's blue and it says Star Trek Chronology on it.
Nope, wrong one. Did you send it to me? Did you recently?
Chronology, right next to the one with the words
see,
on it.
what's happened is no. It's taking its time to get to me. So I've only literally just got it. So that I can be excused for that. So here we go. I'm bringing it up right now. It's loaded up, guys. Here we go. There you go. Star Trek Chronology.
Now that's just the first edition of same. There's 2 editions made. And in fact, I am somewhat personally connected to this because my name is in it.
What?
Yes. I didn't write the book at all. I simply did my own fan chronology research long before it was published. I happened to pass it on to Michael Okuda when he was giving a lecture at a con long ago, and then forgot about it. And apparently he did not. Apparently several fans contributed material that he did not forget. And when this book was published, to my surprise, during my college years, I found in the acknowledgement section my name. Now we can get back to that picture with the words on it that you briefly put up, and which should be next to it. There I am. So it's not like I have no authority to speak of blah, blah, blah bullshit boasting. I'm the Pflueger.
Erik Pflueger, there it is, look.
Motherfucker. Wow. And there are, and Alex Rosenzweig, Gary Wallace, David B. Dornberg, Terry Jones, Melvin Schutz, Ronald Roden Jr. all must be equally credited and must be allowed to boast. But yeah, I'm in there. But in that book also is the origin of this stupid misconception. And another page on that book I sent you has the quote in it. At the bottom, editor's note. Following production of the episode Q Who for Star Trek The Next Generation, which fans may recall is the episode that introduced the Borg on that show, Gene Roddenberry half-jokingly speculated that the planet encountered by Voyager, i.e. in the motion picture, might have been the Borg homeworld. Okay, we need to focus on the word jokingly.
You see, this is the thing, right? This is like almost the beginning of nerdism, right?
Exactly.
We haven't got to the point yet where you can't say half joke on the internet and have it roll downhill. You know, you can't have Tom Holland go, oh, maybe Batman's in Spider-Man, and all of a sudden there's this storm of people going, oh my god, they're doing a DC crossover. It was a joke he made in a pub. Do you know what I mean? Like,
no, it's not that. It's simply that it awakened fan interest in the idea. It is half joking speculation, the book says, but it's still speculation, and that did indeed capture fan interest, so much so that when William Shatner wrote a novel, teamed up with the Reeve Stevenses, he did a plot about V'Ger actually being attached to the Borg, having been assimilated by the Borg, and this is the result. I think that's bullshit. And I mean no malice whatsoever to fans who actually believe that or want to believe that. I'm just going to rail against it strictly for funs. That's all. For instance, look at the picture that I did of V'Ger in pencil. See, now there's the spacecraft, which according to the novel and the original script is 78 kilometers in length. What, double the length of Manhattan Island, according to the novel? I'd have to go. But I won't always be turning pages on this episode. Now, beneath it, at 3 and a little over kilometers, is a Borg cube of average size. That is its canon measurements. Nothing close. In fact, any larger Borg constructs in the Star Trek universe, like the Borg Unicomplex, have always just looked like cubist structures haphazardly placed. This thing has a different sort of design altogether. Yes, the creation of machines who may or may not have a sense of aesthetics because they're machines only. But in this case, their basic task of designing a vessel strictly based on function led them in a completely different direction than the Borg. Even next to that, you'll see the next largest Borg ship, a Borg sphere, seen in Star Trek First Contact. It's nothing like that. The Borg seem concerned entirely with very basic shapes and solids as sizes, as shapes for their vessels. V'Ger doesn't display that. It's not symmetrical even. It's symmetrical to a point, but a certain part of it is asymmetrical. There's not a sphere on both sides. There is on the back end of it. There's not an ass with There's not an ass with little veins sticking off of it like on the back end of this thing, but there are. There's not a maw on the front of it on both ends, but there is on that. It's because it's not perfectly symmetrical. The Borg are.
They have two different purposes as well, though. If you think about V'Ger, Borg are a Borg collective. They're a hive mind that want to grow and to assimilate the whole universe. Whereas V'Ger had a goal, had a mission, to find the founder, the creator, find the creator. They may look similar, but they had two completely different purposes. So
also we don't even know if the Borg have a concept of a god in this sense, and the thing that people use in order to get away with it is the notion that they could say, well, these are just breaking down and patterning all of these ships, planets, life forms, and other things, is its attempt to assimilate things, whereas the Borg assimilate things in a completely different way than that. They do it at the level of the body horror physical. They don't just scan you down into an energy information pattern and record you and store you. The Borg are about body horror, and they're about the improvement of an, at the end of the day, organic form of life. V'ger is not that. Neither are the beings who built him. They are simply machines. According to novelization, they were there God knows how long. What happened to the original creators of them that probably were organic, God only knows. They were simply caretakers of the planet for a long time before the Voyager probe ever found it and fell into its orbit. The Borg and V'ger and the people that made V'ger are not related.
What I love about V'ger and the Voyager 6, I think they call it, is Voyager 6, right? It's building that bridge between us now. Obviously, Voyager 2 had just gone out and it's still going out there, still traveling across the universe. Us now and Star Trek then, because that kind of builds the bridges. Obviously, Starfleet is based in San Francisco. We recognize that. We recognize Earth. We recognize the constructs of everything. But when you go like, oh my God, yeah, like that could so happen with Voyager now, it kind of it's reaching around and reaching around. That sounds wrong, but you know what I mean. It gives you something in common.
You don't have the goddamn common courtesy to offer me a reach around.
That was definite slip of the tongue, by the way.
But in a film that's sexually suggestive, like Star Trek: The Motion Picture, we'll let it slide.
I mean, this is about the whole film is about conception, right? They want to go and be together. The
and creator. It actually results in a union of a man and a woman, resulting in the creation of a quote-unquote baby. And again, that's thematically sexual imagery. It isn't necessarily up to date with the more broader spectrum of sexual thematic imagery that we have available today. But in terms of 1979, I must credit this as being very sophisticated.
Yes, I agree.
And even McCoy at the end goes, well, it's been a long time since I've delivered a baby. What V'ger eventually became, gods only know. We are allowed to imagine a lot. I will say this. I need to give credit to Roddenberry as a writer for the novelization of this in the respect that it describes V'ger transcending all of this and achieving a new form. And the way the novelization describes it finally ending is gorgeous. It then became too lovely for them to comprehend, and so it was gone without ever really leaving. And I was able to recall that off the top of my head because it stuck in my head that much. I don't even have to open the book.
And I think
it then became too lovely for them to comprehend.
This segues into a really good point of both these parts, to be honest. With you said you don't have collectomania, right? You collect these things because you want them, not because you need to. You went on to become the artist that you are today, and obviously this is means a lot to you, right? Visually, it's inspired you a lot. Can we talk a bit about that? Like, what is it about this and the visuals that makes your heart go? What is it that excites you?
I haven't done that in the last hour and a half. Simply by virtue of going to it, simply that the cosmic imagery of it all is impressive for a young'un. I didn't see this film in the theater. I would have been 6 or 7. So I might have been able to take it being a rated G film, but I never was a fan of crowds. And no, I became a fan of it when it became broadcast on television in the early 80s on ABC. And there was a certain amount of editing to add extra footage into it, and it became known as the special longer version when released on videotape, VHS, which was the way a lot of fans experienced it for quite a while. Then in the early 2000s, when DVD came along, Robert Wise wanted it edited as he would have wished had he been allowed time to edit it. Again, the studio was locked into a release date long before that decision could have been made, and everything had to yield to it. A situation not at all unfamiliar to us these days, where indeed the scheduling is everything, pandemics notwithstanding. But yeah, they made an edit of the film in the early 2000s that became released on DVD. When they started streaming and doing Blu-ray, they could only work from the original negative. So the original 79 version ended up being the dominant version on Blu-ray and on streaming, because they had to kick up the effects to 4K in order to make it work for Blu-ray and streaming on the director's edition. They have now gotten the crew back to do precisely that. Kick up the effects to work in 4K on streaming and on Blu-ray, and they are releasing same next year.
So they're remastering it, essentially remastering it, and it leads me to the question of, we had the reboot in 2009, which wasn't a reboot. It was like, oh my god, we have the special effects and the ability to make it look like it's modern and stuff. Let's do that. That's basically what that was. If they said they were going to remake this movie with a new cast and almost shot for shot, how would you feel about that?
Holy shit. I laugh, first of all, because that will never happen.
Oh, no, of course
I promise you.
But just say
the reaction to this movie was mixed, but leaning towards the negative. Because of the long, unbroken effect sequences, which I regard as visual tone poems and musical numbers, but the audience in general regard it as boring. The slow, deliberate pace and hard sci-fi edge of the film I regard as plus, but the general art and the audience regard it as boring. And indeed, everything about the follow-up film was absolutely a reaction to that. Just as, I guess, Man of Steel was a reaction to Superman Returns. And the effect of the success of Wrath of Khan was such that they never had an inclination to return to the more cerebral, quote-unquote, storytelling of the motion picture, just as the series, the original series, didn't necessarily feel the obligation to be as, quote-unquote, cerebral as the original pilot, The Cage, was. And indeed, network producers called that pilot too cerebral and had him go back and do it again. So, yes, this film is something of a in between the original series and its eccentricities and the more very personal character-based tone and a bit more action-adventure emphasis of movies 2, 3, and 4.
So, like, obviously, I explained on the other episode, listeners, that I do enjoy Star Trek, but I started at The Next Generation. The original series is the one I've never watched, which I should do, really. But so from this moment on, they just went on to making movies, or did they bring up the series again? Because I know it's like 60s. Is it just movies from this point on?
Because the reaction to the motion picture was mixed, they did indeed decide to do Star Trek 2, although with a substantially reduced budget and staffed by people who were able to work within that reduced budget. People more experienced in television than film. And by the way, there's a certain amount of unfairness to that statement with regard to the motion picture, because a lot of costs were carried over from the Phase 2 attempted series. That didn't happen. So Star Trek 2 was made, but it was not expected necessarily to be a great success either. It was just as likely to be aired on television as a TV movie than as a film in a theater. Luckily, it was good, so it aired in a theater. And
I was going to say,
luckily, it was good enough that people decided they would commit to a third one and then a fourth one. And every time they were not sure and then said, oh, okay, we'll commit to another one. But the next one better still do well. And every time the budgets kept getting smaller and smaller too.
Yeah, and they did the set. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I got excited. I was I need to say this thing right now. But they did something similar with the Next Generation movies. The last one they did, Nemesis, had a very much a movie TV type vibe, and it was very good. I really enjoyed Nemesis. I thought it was really, really good. Featured a very young Tom Hardy as well. But no, it was a very good film.
It's the Force Awakens of these films because it's very much attempting to be Wrath of Khan again. In fact, a fair statement might be that having achieved such a success with Wrath of Khan, they always tried to chase the dragon that was the success of Wrath of Khan. In other words, a lot of films were about a guy wanting revenge and having a doomsday device. The Plinkett people have said that, and it's, I think, an accusation that holds water.
How do you think Benedict Cumberbatch did?
Magnificently. It's not his fault.
No, yeah, of course. I love him.
That script is something that I could really talk about through gritted teeth. But we're not going to do that here. I mean, I could fairly say, I could pick holes in this story and its plot. Of course I could. But the point I want to make about it is that being more or less a musical, it is immune from such criticisms to a point.
I think it was a tip of the cap to fans of sci-fi, Star Trek in particular. Like I said, right, I mentioned on part one that the slow flight up to the Enterprise with Scotty and with Kirk. And there's this slow musical bit where they're flying around the ship slowly. That's a kind of, here, guys, you've only ever seen it on a small screen, and most of you in black and white. Here it is in its full glory. Enjoy. Sit back, enjoy, relax. And, that's what I got from it.
I might add that we could bury an episode entirely in just what it took to make an Enterprise look very, quote-unquote, realistic in our sense of the term, as opposed to the model that was used on the original series. But we'd be here again all frickin' day, and that's fine. I could always get material that I could identify for future use. Why not? I'm a bit
it all boils back down to art. It really does art. That scene flying around the Enterprise, the music, the speed of it, even it's all designed to affect you emotionally, so I think they did a great job. And obviously this film went on to be a trendsetter, like you said. They made another movie and another movie, and
in the sense that having started the franchise and having made enough money to have justified its cost somewhat, they decided, okay, we could go for broke and keep this machine going one movie longer, and then one movie longer after that. One more time and on and on. And this movie got kind of shunted aside after Star Trek II as the kind of unaccepted child of the series, until The Final Frontier came along and said, oh, no, this is what a movie looks like if it's Star Trek, and it's a pile. I'm sorry, Bill. I'm sorry, Mr. Shatner. But yes. There's also the question, oh, by the way, you talk about it, these moments, these musical number, visual tone poems, they generate aesthetic arrest in you, just like a musical number might. That's the point you were trying to get at. And it sets this film apart from the other films by a long shot. And yeah, admit it, it gave you a sense of arrest to go, oh, pretty. Look at the travel pod flying around the ship. Ooh, gorgeous.
It's almost like a drum roll going on for too long, though. I mean, I get it, I totally get it, and I accept it as what it is. But like, it's like drum roll, please, and let's say the drum roll went on for 4 minutes, people will be like, "When's the reveal coming?" Because
and
I feel like
understand that sentiment if I don't necessarily agree with it. You want the movie to go on. There's a sense of urgency. There's a giant space cloud coming to Earth. We only got so much time, and yet they have these musical numbers. But because it's a quote unquote musical in my mind, they're excused. I just keep having to come back to that point, but that is my defense of this movie in a nutshell. And a lot can be swept under the rug. That is it.
Well, I hadn't seen this movie since I was a child, literally a child, and I didn't remember any of it. So I'm really glad that I got to revisit this and in my mind for the first time, because when I did watch it, I didn't remember it. So one of the two things I took from it were the slow musical bits. Tip of the cap to sci-fi fans. That's what I got from that. And then there's a whole Voyager thing. I love that they included Voyager in that, because that is the start of man's exploration, in comparison to how long it's taken to get to where they are now. That's the start of space exploration for mankind. And that thing that they made went on to do something what it did. It could have destroyed Earth. It could have came back like a very fast tennis ball that you hit against a wall. I like it.
You give me a couple idea for two observations right there. For one thing, okay, Voyager 6?
Yeah.
Why does that bother me in the comedic sense? Because there were only 2 Voyager probes launched in real life. I should mention parenthetically that no, Voyager was not the very first probe, of course, sent out. Others were sent out before. It is certainly emblematic of early space exploration when set against these people. Yes. Why does it bother me? There were only 2 probes sent, and purposely only 2, because they had to take advantage of a very extremely rare alignment of the outer planets. And Voyagers 1 and 2 were launched on a specific schedule and timing in order to take advantage of that alignment, which allowed those 2 probes between them to get the spectacular shots of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, that we have been using for decades since. The fact that this film projects 6 sounds like bullshit in a number of ways. For one thing, it suggests a profoundly more robustly funded space program than the one we have in real life.
Only an American could come up with something like that. Like, we would never fund that. I know that.
Not that they've never, I wish that they would, but we understand in real life that they didn't, and that the budget was never there for that. They could have simply called it Voyager 3. I would have believed that they had both the time and the budget to build a third fictional one in the time that they had to take advantage of that rare alignment of the outer planets. But that's it. 6? No space probe agency on Earth, then or now, is sufficiently funded to embark on a Voyager space probe program that is that robust.
Yeah.
Just isn't. Also, the chronology speculates that it was launched in 1999. Bullshit. For what alignment of the planets would it have been launched then? Experts could correct me, indeed, and I would happily yield to them. But on this, I just don't feel that I'm that wrong. And it's a bullshit observation, but I'm right. Also, they had this cheesy outer plate that was half obliterated by an encounter with space debris, God knows when, or God knows what. And that's why they made the misconception that this thing's name was V'ger and not Voyager 6.
Yeah.
But what about the record album made in gold that was put inside the internal structure of these probes to avoid being hit by space debris, if I remember correctly, and had all kinds of visual images of human beings doing things and talking?
We are here to see the monkeys. Where are the monkeys? Give us the monkeys. Hey, it's the monkeys.
It'd have been more logical, yuck, if they'd have sent the probe and it said that, because all of the images of human beings doing things, and indeed the recording on the album of Nick Sagan, Carl Sagan's son, if I'm not mistaken, saying, "Hello from the children of planet Earth." You're going to tell me that the great machines living on this planet far away, okay, I'll grant that they're strictly logical and therefore creativity of the kind we're talking about perhaps is beyond them. But I maintain that even logical only beings should have been able to put two and two together and infer that these beings of flesh were indeed intelligent. But V'ger clearly doesn't think that flesh and blood beings are intelligent because they're just referred to as carbon-based units. And according to the novel, V'ger has no idea why the hell it keeps encountering all these civilizations with these stupid carbon-based units on them when that just happen to be around all of these planets that have machines on them, which it thinks are living beings and conscious, like it is. The novel even has them going, are these carbon-based units just like waste extracted from the actual machine life forms? What are they?
I love that, carbon units. I'd love to be... You ain't nothing but a stupid fucking carbon unit, are you? That's my new thing now, by the way. You ain't nothing but a carbon unit, are you, love? That's what you are.
What a low blow. That's lower than Nerf Herder. But you see what I mean? I'm trying to figure out, in real life, they would have seen that golden record. Are you telling me that they couldn't devise a means of playing the record and that's why they don't know? Again, it's a musical. It's immune from this sort of criticism, but I'm having fun doing it anyway.
But to be fair, if somebody said to me, right, go and make a record player then. Here's a disc. Here's a vinyl disc. Find a way to listen to that. I'd be
you could invent a needle.
Yeah, well, I don't know how that works. I don't know how a vinyl player works. I know that it works, but I don't know how that needle gets the music from the disc. I don't understand that. You know, maybe I should. I don't know. Maybe I'm being really dumb, but I just don't understand. I don't understand how a laser looks at a CD and goes, "Oh yeah, this is Nirvana. Let's play Nirvana." You know.
And of course, this probe falls into what they used to call a black hole, quote unquote. What do they call it in these people's century now? They use the term black hole and other things in this Star Trek universe. So
what they needed was they used to call a black hole before Disney got hold of it.
They didn't still, and Disney, they made a fine film, more or less. It's at least visually striking, as I said, filled with phenomenal cosmic imagery.
I've got to give a shout out to George Takei with his smolder, by the way. Whenever there's a camera on there, it's like, oh my God. It's brilliant. I love him. I think it's fantastic.
Okay, a couple of asides strictly to fit in as ways to back up the phenomenal cosmic shit in this film. I like to plug Jerry Goldsmith's music, of course. Special mention goes out to an instrument I know you heard, but probably didn't have a name for. Whenever V'ger is shown, or sometimes even hinted, the leitmotif, according to the Wagnerian musical term, the motive that they use for V'ger is this weird bong.
Yeah.
That's an instrument referred to as the blaster beam. Now, Jerry Goldsmith is famed for unorthodox experimentation in his scores, especially with science fiction scores. His score for the original Planet of the Apes had moments where they were beating on metal mixing bowls. And if there was an episode about this, God knows if. It's not really impactful to me, the Ape series, but if I were to do one, I might make special mention of the mixing bowls. Same here. Goldsmith loves to be experimental, particularly when depicting alien or unearthly or weird. What the blaster beam is, if I'm just going to freeform it, but if I'm right, it's a gigantic piece of metal with strings stretched across it, not very different from a stringed instrument. And you hit it with another big piece of metal, a giant metal shell, or gun shell, it says, and you get that sound. Boom. You were very quick.
Yes, well, there you go. There's a blaster beam right there.
And if I'm correct, that's its inventor, Craig Hundley, who actually had a couple guest roles on the original Star Trek series, and in a sense was brought back as an alumni for this film.
Is that Bill Shatner that's out there? The great tux. I don't know. Maybe.
Doesn't look it, no. But it's a very small picture for my eyes.
That's humongous, though. That's crazy.
Yeah. Now, these people appear to be hitting it with something a bit smaller than a giant cannon shell, but the effect is the same. And by manipulating the strings, you can change the tone of the blaster beam, which is why it goes upward in pitch. Boom. Including in the great transcendence sequence at the end, where it really soars so high that it too becomes too lovely for me to comprehend, and so it's gone without ever really leaving, i.e. the blaster beam sound simply is allowed to gradually fade off.
Speaking of too lovely to comprehend, I got to give a huge shout out to Pussy Kambata for playing Aaliyah. Aaliyah, the prettiest woman without hair I've ever seen in my life. Honestly, I was like, wow, she's beautiful. Like, I don't know.
A rather pretty person with hair, too. And I'm about to send you a picture, which you may or may not be able to get on the show, of what she looks like with hair. Quite striking, as it turns out.
I'm on her IMDb now. She's beautiful.
There it is.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay. We'll bring that up. Sit it down. I can be as quick as technology will allow me to be.
The character itself is somewhat emblematic of Gene Roddenberry's, there she is, sensibilities. The lighting could be better on her for this picture, but she has always been a very gorgeous woman. Now no longer with us, alas. Known principally for this film, for good or ill, because she both delivered and did not deliver a performance. She was convincing where she needed to be, I think, in terms of being an emotional and empathic person in the first half of the film. She delivered where she needed to be in terms of being an emotionless, affectless character in the second half of the film. Although I wonder if that didn't stick to her in such a way that she was kind of regarded as being not quite the best actress because she was too good at being flat of affect.
Yeah, you can't say to someone, be really bland, and then have them say things like, I don't like sand. And then and then complain when they do what they're told.
And they have to wait for me decades later to come up with a way to justify it, i.e. I don't like sand. And the Hayden Christensen performance in this, or in my saying the motion picture is a musical, so let it go, assholes. That sort of thing.
He's going to be at Wales Comic Con, by the way. The Comic Con it's in Telford. It's in the town next to me. He's going to be there. I can get a picture of Hayden Christensen. I'd be like, oh, I got this thing that Erik Pflueger.
You should pat yourself on the back if you should manage it. I don't know if he'd have much patience for my argument in his defense. I don't think it needs to be aired to him, but by all means, shake his hand, get his signature.
Anyway, we're crossing franchises here.
Well, just a little bit of casual off-subject thing never hurts. I look forward to seeing if he's really going to show up in the Obi-Wan series, and if he does, how he will. And that's all I have there.
Sorry, I was muting myself. No, I loved it.
The second point was that I was going to make with regard to it, but it may hit my head again before we're done.
Sorry, I interrupted you. I was like,
that's Oh well, I guess in the sense that we'll skip that. I was going, should I talk extensively about the fact that Aaliyah as a Deltan is regarded as being a member of a very certain cuts of the film, say, sexually mature species? Granting that the film itself, as I said repeatedly, is dealing with sexually mature thematic
Isn't that what Diana Troy was? Was she the same?
She was more of an empathic sense, i.e. she could feel feelings.
Well, was
the
she
notion of the Deltans no, she was a Beta Z for all.
Oh, okay, sorry. I got confused.
Different Greek letter bullshit name. But again, it's made much clearer in certain cuts of the film and in the novel. But the Deltans regard sex the way you would regard a handshake. Indeed, a handshake for you would be sex to them, and the equivalent of a handshake might indeed be one variant of a sexual act. And next to us, we are, as the film and the novel regards us, a sexually immature species when set against that. Now, with regard to whether that means that Roddenberry simply looks forward to a time when, or to seeing a species with a much different and more laid-back view of sexuality than we do, or whether he not, well, I say that's just part of the 70s in space thing, because there is a certain amount of, hey, free love mentality carried over from the 60s, but made more spiritually complex. You've added that, and you've got the 70s. So, yeah, I think Ilea was, in a sense, a way, again, of looking at all of this through a 70s mentality, albeit through a space filter.
Yeah. Can you imagine that? Like, I need to check your sexual organs to know if we are compatible. Let me see your penis. You
Thank you for reminding me. Thank you for reminding me of that, because, there is a line in almost all the cuts of this film where in the first scene with Ilea, she says to Kirk, "My oath of celibacy is on record." Another cut, has Sulu going gaga at her because the Deltans naturally just spray pheromones all over the place. And so even he is kind of like, ooh, hello. And granted, I'm reading George Takei's own inclinations into this where I shouldn't. But yeah, it's a way of he gets turned on by Ilea for a minute, and Ilea is like, it's okay. I'd never take advantage of a sexually immature species. In other words, this oath of celibacy must be something Starfleet insists for that Deltans take just to serve in Starfleet, just so that they can keep their crew members from keeping their mind on their jobs. Is that it?
If you're working with Jimmy Kirk, you keep your legs shut. You understand? You keep your legs shut.
And that oath of celibacy better be on record for any ship that Kirk's in charge of. No, I'm kidding. Really, the reputation of Kirk as a Lothario really isn't that strong, particularly when you examine the original series carefully. It's more like a James Bond, I have to do it for God and country sort of thing, more often than not. You know what I mean? But just what this says about the society these people live in with regard to sexual politics, with regard to Deltans specifically, when exposed to other sentient species not Deltan, it's weird, but it's so 70s as to merit comment. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
It's that 70s disco-looking Dr. McCoy low neckline medallion wearing 70s.
I was just in a shisha restaurant. What the hell did you do that for? I was in the shisha bar. Yeah.
I was in a six-way with 7 Orions. One of them was just sitting back and enjoying it.
Damn it, I'm not a doctor anymore, Jim.
And your revered Admiral Nagara beams me off, son of a bitch. But again, it's just so wacky and so specific to a certain time. It's just palpable, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Duna. You can see the 70s all over it. It's reeking of it.
Cheap weed, man.
Right.
I mean, the listeners, if you what do you think? Do you agree over this part 1 and part 2 episode? Have you agreed with what we've been saying? I mean, obviously, when it comes to the art and the visuals, it is what it is. But when it comes to this being what it is, and do you agree that it's a musical, like Erik is saying? Do you agree that I think that the scene going up to the Enterprise was probably a little bit too long? Working on the timing would have been great. Did you enjoy the movie? Did you not enjoy the movie?
Mr. Pflueger disagrees. Which of us do you agree with? Either is fine. Either opinion is valid. It's not. It's like Twix. Pick a side. But it really isn't, because both of them taste the same.
But what I would like to state is we're not bitches about this. We like to discuss. We genuinely love to discuss these kind of things. So if you would like to get involved with the conversation, drop a comment on this YouTube video. You can find us on Facebook, USUK, USUK on Facebook, at USUK podcast network. We have the USUK fan page as well. So if you do want to get in with the discussion, just message us and we'll get involved. For the guys that are listening, not watching, if you want to know what we're looking at and you don't know what, you can go to our Facebook page. I'll upload all of the pictures here onto our Facebook page so you can follow along. So
yes.
probably should have said that at the beginning, really.
There's a metric ton of images this time, and I think that may be a bit of the style going forward because I found value in having these visual aids in this sort of thing, because yes, it is still a lecture, albeit free form and kind of meandering like a half crazed old man is like to do. But I found that the every good lecture about visuals is helped by visuals. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I mean, I can say, oh, it looks like an eye, but if you turn your head to the side, it looks like a vagina. And you'd be like, yeah, really? But until you see it.
And nothing sells that like the image. A picture is most definitely worth 1,000 words in this case. It's just the CBS logo. Shut
up. But yeah, guys, please get in touch. Like Eric, are we running short on time? Are we done here?
So brief summation. Why do I like Star Trek: The Motion Picture? Phenomenal cosmic imagery. And it came to me at a time when I was old enough to be receptive to the cosmic imagery, not so young as to have it go over my heads. Perhaps not old enough to be receptive to the very subtle but elaborately used sexual thematic themes. But I did pick up on those eventually. That's not why I like it. It's the cosmic shit. But I did notice that later as I grew up and got more mature. But yes, the real appeals for me are the visuals, and specifically those of Sid Mead and Robert Mccall that I've mentioned before. By all means, look up their work. A simple Google image search will do the trick. Jerry Goldsmith and Douglas Trumbull also get mentioned. And let's not neglect all the many other names that contributed to the film. But by all means, do some research. You'll find yourself finding it enjoyable. Look up Jeff Bond and Gene Kozicki's Making Up book on the film, and you'll be enlightened and entertained. And you'll see a lot more beautiful artwork, too, by the way, both by Mead and Mccall and many others. And do I keep it in the classic yelling at clouds format? Well, of course I do. Obviously, this film is dated, or I wouldn't be calling it the Attack of the 1970s in Space. Because of its dating, that's why I love it. Indeed, several films that we'll be talking about. And yes, I keep it, but I acknowledge it as a product of its time.
I was in Oxfam today, which is, I don't know if you have Oxfam in America. It's a secondhand store. And I was looking at the LPs and vinyl. And there was that smell from that cardboard, old magazine type smell that you get when something's been in a box for 25 years or something. And I used to hate that smell when I was a kid. I was like, oh, that's really nice. That's really nostalgic. It's something really nice about it.
Smell patchouli all over this movie.
Right. Okay. Let's tell a few people about USUK and what we got going on the show.
Time for some plugs.
Yeah, let's do this. By the time this goes out, we will have done Pod Aid. So if you helped Pod Aid, if you were part of it, thank you very much. If I've got this wrong and it's about to happen, it's on the 29th of September, and we're going to be going until the 30th of September. Go to Pod Aid on Just Giving. Go Just Giving /Pod Aid and find us. Drop some money in there. We really do appreciate it. But also, I want to tell you guys about USUK. Notice how I'm not doing a massive elaborate explanation, because at this point people will know what's going on with Pod Aid. That's why I'm not doing that. But with USUK, we have a collection of shows. It's what we do. It's like a community of people come together and make content for you guys. So we have this show that we're doing right now, which is Yelling at Clouds, which is what you've just listened to. And make sure you go back and listen to past episodes if you've enjoyed this one. We also have Wednesday Night Live, which is every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. on UK time, 4 p.m. Eastern time. It's a bit like us meeting at the pub and having a chat and having a bit of fun with your mates. At the moment, we're doing rabbit holes we talked about boglins and Mighty Max and Pogs and Silly String and things like that just like just invest in these conversations because they're good for nostalgia. We also have What's the Difference podcast, which me and my good friend Tom Bruno, who lives in Vermont, we speak to authors, we speak to actors, we speak to people that make movies, we speak to musicians, and we talk about culture either side of the Atlantic. And it's all part of USUK. You can find us on YouTube, which is where you're watching us now. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can also go to our website, which is usuknetwork.com, and that's made for us by our friends at Web Orchard, which again I don't have a slide for, but go to weborchard.com, say that we sent you, all right, if you want a website, and they'll make you a nice one. So Erik, I love chatting to you, man. I feel like I get brainier every time. I really do.
Well, or at the very least, I've made this so elaborate and meandering that you're like, oh my God, I'm in a trance state. I'll just say that I'm enlightened so I can get the hell out of here. Opinions may vary. Just as opinions varied on this movie. Is it heady trip or is it absolutely boring snooze fest? You decide. I say it's a heady trip, and I say it's worth your time. Now, if I had a plug, it's simply that you should go visit my website, www.cygnusartsinc.com. There's nothing to buy there yet, but you will see examples of my work. We are working in the near future to get it ready to buy things on, and we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, all I can say is, Alex, I had a fantastic time here holding class with you, and I look forward to the next one. So I think we've milked enough material out of this one. So for now, ladies and gents, class dismissed.